Great. Thank you, Michael. And thank you all. And particularly, I want to thank John McLeod, not only for this invitation, which I really appreciate, a chance to chat with you at a Pluralistic Counselling and Psychotherapy conference, which I've not joined before, but I also want to thank John for his intellectual leadership and support and camaraderie over many years. So it's a great pleasure to be with you. And we had a bit of a chat about what might sort of be resonant for this event. And so I'm going to share some of those various stories. I really thrive on interaction. So I have a little notepad, iPad here where I can see the chat. So please, at any moment, just keep putting questions there, or comments or disagreements or comments about the weather or anything else in the chat. I will really appreciate it, seeing as this is technologically set up in a way that I won't be able to hear your voices. That would be really, really appreciated. Okay, so I'm here, yes, in the dark at the moment, but pretending that I'm outside. That picture behind me is just outside Dulwich Centre, and so tomorrow morning maybe I'll be wandering out there. And I'm speaking to you from this continent, obviously, far away, down under. You've probably heard of down under, but do you know that means you're up over? That's sort of a less commonly used phrase, I think, up over, but it's very nice to be talking to you, up over. And I'm not sure how many of you have already seen this map. Hopefully some of you. I certainly didn't see it during my younger years. There are dominant stories and alternative stories. There are also dominant maps, ways that we depict our lands. And this one represents the hundreds and hundreds of different First Nations, different Aboriginal peoples who have and continue to live on this continent, with hundreds and hundreds of different systems of law, hundreds and hundreds of different languages, different philosophies, and different psychologies. So in terms of pluralism or multiple perspectives coming together, this continent is quite an extraordinary example. Now I'm here, yes, at Dulwich Centre in the city that's now called Adelaide, but it's on what we now also are catching up and referring to as Kaurna land, because the First Nations peoples who have for tens of thousands of years been the caretakers and custodians of this particular part of the continent are called the Kaurna people. So, and Kaurna elders have been significant in the development of narrative practice. Now, it's not the topic for this talk, but if you came here, come in summer, our summer, you could then take a walk around those sorts of landscapes on this walking history journey. And if you're interested, I can send you the text and even send you links to where you can hear the audio files. And Auntie Barbara Wingard, Senior Kaurna Elder and Aboriginal narrative practitioner, tells the story of particular histories all around this, this part of the southeast corner of Adelaide. And when we do training now, people come for a week's narrative therapy training, we actually don't start sitting in the classroom. We start by walking together and engaging with these particular histories. So I can't obviously do that with you now, but I just wanted to give a bit of a sense of where I'm speaking from and how these sorts of engagements with history are transforming pedagogy, transforming the teaching of therapy, and much, much more. This land is understanding itself very differently as we continue to reckon with our history. Anyway, I will probably mention throughout this hour that I could send you things, and I will, but I will forget. So actually, I really need someone to make a list of anything that I say that I could send. Would someone be happy to volunteer to make that list? I saw Barbara kindly has written in the chat saying that they would like. Barbara, would you be happy to make a list for me? Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, so first thing on that list is to send this information about the walking history journey, but I'm bound to say other things that I will forget. Okay, so that's just a bit of the context. What I thought I'd start with is this idea of metaphoric practices. I know many of you already engage with metaphor, and all of us work with the stories of people's lives. And of course, we do that in different ways, but realms of story and history, I think, are of interest to all of us. And in the field that I'm in, narrative practice, narrative therapy and community work, we're also, as many of you are, I'm sure, vitally interested in local cultural knowledge, insider knowledge, and folk psychologies as well as expert psychologies. So what I've found absolutely fascinating are situations where we're invited into contexts very different than our own and are being asked, challenged, invited to try and come up with ways of working that will be resonant in a particular context. And lots of the contexts from white Australia are not resonant necessarily in other places. So as a result, we've had to form cross-cultural collaborations and then develop cross-cultural inventions. And I really loved this process, and I just want to share some of those with you, and also try and illustrate a few principles along the way. And I did promise John that I'd also include a song. So we'll include a few songs along the way, and I hope this will be both practical and hopefully resonant with some of your areas of interest. But I will rely on you putting things in the chat with questions or other ideas that will really, really help me. So there are lots of these metaphoric narrative practices that have now been developed. But what's more exciting to me is thinking about which ones you might develop in collaboration with the people with whom you work. I'm much more interested in continually expanding the field rather than just confirming it. So I'll just mention some of the ones that already exist. And the first one, which you may have heard of, because in the UK many, many people are engaged with it, it's called the Tree of Life narrative approach, and was developed by Ngazelo Nkube Malilo and I in response to children in Zimbabwe who were struggling with profound hardships, particularly in relation to having lost many, many loved ones due to HIV/AIDS. So these metaphoric practices, while they are very deliberately accessible, easy to engage, they're also meant to be, some of them at least, able to be engaged with some degree of fun and lightheartedness. They're actually developed from and for contexts of profound social suffering. And that was true in relation to the Tree of Life. And the idea is that we can create something, create a visual image, in this case of a tree. Different aspects of the image or the metaphor are related to different aspects of our identity. And we do this in ways so that these kids could get more in touch with their skills and abilities and what they give value to. Also be able to do a collective process so they can talk about hardships, but very deliberately in ways that wouldn't bring more nightmares, wetting the bed, all the sorts of things that were happening when Marzalo and her team were asking the kids to speak in the first person or to speak directly about their lives. Sometimes speaking directly about hardships can actually be pretty problematic, as I'm sure you're well aware. So this was the first metaphoric practice, and I can send lots of different information about that. There are lots of people in the UK who offer workshops, and Marzalo often comes to the UK. So I'm not going to talk more about the Tree of Life, except to show these pictures. Okay, just to give you a glimpse then, we were working with colleagues and a community of Tamil refugees in Toronto in Canada, and they weren't so interested in trees as a metaphor or an aspect of local culture, but they were passionate about kites. They said, can't we do something about kites? It's as if kites represent the Tamil people. We've had to flee for our lives, and kites were an aspect of folk culture that lit up people's eyes. Despite hardships, their eyes lit up when talking about kites. So we collaborated and created a methodology in relation to kites. Colleagues in Hong Kong working with young people, they said they're not interested in trees, they're not interested in kites, but boy, they're really interested in their smartphones. Could we use the metaphor of a smartphone and unpack this and relate this to their identities? And yes, we absolutely could. The song lists, the apps, the wallpaper. Anyway, I can send you information about how this metaphor was being engaged with in Hong Kong. Sometimes there are profound moments in time, and a particular metaphor like the umbrella became so significant during the umbrella movement in Hong Kong. And so this was an aspect of local culture that Ip Kim Ching then thought, when people were struggling with the aftermath of what had happened in relation to the responses by the state to the umbrella movement. So he developed a metaphor through the umbrella. I'm just running through these very quickly because I just want to give the examples of the diversity, and I can send more information about all of them. Similarly, recipes of life. Now I saw actually someone, is it Donna? Donna, you look like you're in a fantastic kitchen and could really help me do developments with the recipes of life. I could be generalizing from your screen, but anyway, the recipes of life is again another option if people are interested in realms of food and cooking and all those rituals. And we can speak about sharing recipes of how to get through hard times and creating recipes of stories and skills of survival knowledge and then sharing these. Anyway, I'm sure you get the idea. There are many of these. I want to give you that sense because I'm going to just talk about one now, the Team of Life. And it was created again in a specific context. And it might not be relevant for you, or more importantly, it might not be relevant for the people you're meeting with. Because each one of these methodologies are created in order for them to be resonant with whoever we're talking to. It doesn't matter if we're so interested in that aspect of local folk culture. It matters if the people we're meeting with are, because they will then have a rich vocabulary in that area of life. Our Tamil friends had a rich vocabulary about kites. Others have rich vocabularies about recipes. Anyway, and some have rich vocabularies about sporting realms. I think you've got two pretty big events happening there in... sorry, Michael. I guess in this scenario, when I'm talking about folk cultures, I'm really looking at quite micro examples of local, ordinary, everyday life that people have a connection to, they give value to, they care about, and sometimes it's a profound achievement that they have this connection right in the midst of profound horrors or hardship. So that's sort of what I mean by these local folk cultural rituals and meanings. Let me give you an example of this story of where the team of life emerged from, because it might give you a sense of how we can notice these and then develop our ways of working from them. So colleagues in Uganda, Caleb Wakungu in particular, and Barbara, Barbara, if you could make note of work from Uganda to remind me to send it, does sparkling community work in rural Uganda. They'd asked us to try to support them in how to work with young people, mostly young men, who had been recruited into militia and military groups in northern Uganda and were now in refugee camps near the border of Sudan. And they were saying, how can we use narrative practices, but in this particular context? And when our team visited at their invitation and we got to the refugee camp, the young people were playing football, the round ball football that was, I think, you have a connection to in your country and broader culture there. The round ball game was being played and embraced with verve and delight and teamwork right in this midst of a refugee camp. With grace and kindness to each other and celebrations of each other when there was a goal that was achieved. And it seemed that the problems of memory were not haunting people when they were on the football field. Then they got called over to meet with our team, and they were asked to speak in the first person about their lives. And suddenly all that energy and vigor and social cohesion and connectedness evaporated, and shame came like moving over all of us, and their heads went down. And it was just so clear that as, you know, the people who'd been invited there, our very presence was being linked to this idea that you would get people to talk directly in the first person about life. It was clear we were somehow participating in or creating this really a ritual of degradation. But it's such a common idea that you would need to get people to talk in the first person. Anyway, these young people were clearly showing us something else. They'd just shown us that there was an aspect of local culture, local folk culture, in this case football, and how they were engaging with it, that was very, very meaningful. And can't we then use that as the starting point for our practice? So it was a real challenge to me, an offering, I thought, from these young folks. So that led to the development of the team of life approach. And I'm just going to talk about it pretty quickly, and then I want to show you a video, a short video of what it's made possible for a young person and their family here in Adelaide, right back in a different part of the world. So with any of these methodologies, we start by trying to represent our identities in in sort of visual or metaphoric form, and each metaphor offers different things, so they all look different. But in this case, football, or any team sport, actually is a very powerful metaphor for a collective sense of identity. Because we can ask, like, if your life is a team, who would be your goalkeeper? Which at first I thought was just a boring football term. But when you think about it as, wait a minute, there's something going on in this aspect of culture. Goalkeeper is actually a beautiful phrase. Who is protecting your goals in life? And they could be alive or no longer alive. It's probably hard for you to see, but this young person put mum and God as their goalkeeper. We can ask, who is your coach? They can be alive or no longer alive. They don't even have to be embodied people. They could be heroes, fictional characters, links to religion. But people start to make this team identity. Obviously, there are many other aspects of teams. You don't need to tell me to tell you that. Once we've generated, where are the different people on this team, who's helping to score goals, who's helping to defend your team, who's cheering you on, who are the, spectators. This can even be ancestors sometimes, depending on who we're meeting with. Then we can also ask, what is this team defending? So I'm not asking the individual what is their personal value. I'm asking, what does your team stand for? What does your team believe in? And having a vote, everybody that they've mentioned. Does that make sense? It's a different sort of question that can then be asked. And this young person said, it doesn't matter if you lose as long as you try your best. That was like the philosophy of this team, and we wrote it at the top of this sheet. So now in England, in the UK, you have the most beautiful songs for teams too, do you not? In Australia, crowd singing songs, it's not really much of a go. We didn't, for some reason that didn't really catch on in Australia. But in your part of the world, there are often also songs related to teams. And in no way am I glorifying sporting culture. I know there are horrible things about sporting culture as well. But for some folks that we meet with, there might be quite significant avenue for us to explore. And with this young guy, when I asked him, what song, does your team have a song? I was expecting him to, tell me something like We Are the Champions or some existing song or Sweet Chariot. I don't know what he would be suggesting. But he instead gave me a piece of paper with the lyrics that he had written for his song. And they're incredibly tender words. And this was a young person who does not speak about all that he has been through. He is very, very quiet, but he loves football. So this way in to storytelling worked for him. And this song then, I could just find a melody for it. And it's a very simple melody. It just goes, we love the world, so we have to make it a better place. In this world, there are many people who need our help and our love. In this world, there are many people who need our help and our love. And he liked this song and this version of it. So when we then came together, also to honour one goal, that his team had already scored. So not a future goal. We don't just go and look into the future. It's too hard to look into the future for so many people. Unless we can look back and generate a heritage of achievement. And so we looked at one goal that his team had scored, not him individually. You'll see that's a bit of a trend that I keep sort of alluding to, that we can try and find ways, even if we're working with an individual, we can find ways of asking questions that are not just attending to individual experience. Sometimes that makes it much more possible for people to answer. The goal that his team had scored, You'll Never Walk Alone, that would be a very good, appropriate song to be singing. The goal that his team mentioned was staying together through hard times. And we drew this goal map. It's a way of trying to show all the different contributions that people have made to this goal. And as it turned out, one of the people honoured in this goal map is actually no longer alive. So it's also honouring a treasured relationship. And when this was then honoured, we could celebrate it in sort of sporting form. We could commentate it and then actually cheer it. It was actually quite a joyous and playful moment, but also profound. And then I asked Tony if he wanted to sing his song, and he was like, no way, that would be so embarrassing. There's no way I'm going to do that. I asked, would you like just to introduce it to everybody in this ritual? He's like, no. I said, would you like just to sit up the front when I introduce it and I play it? And he was like, yeah. So then we could play that song that I sang a minute ago in the context of honouring this goal map that had been scored. And you see what becomes possible through this metaphoric practice. I know that I wouldn't have known what to do to make it possible for this engagement with story unless it was through some aspect of life that this young person could really relate to. It was only through metaphor. I'm just going to pause because I want to read all the things in the chat because I've covered quite a few things here already and I know there's activity there. So let me just have a quick peek at the chat here before I go further. Donna, I would be really, really interested if you then do give this a try with the men who you work with. And so often there are just things that are really, really tough to talk about, and finding indirect ways of doing so, I find can make many, many things possible. It's not just about communication, but generation of meaning. I really agree with you, Kate. Something is being created together as we explore these metaphors. And yes, Jessica, seemingly ordinary things, we can come to realize actually they're real social achievements. If people have stayed connected to some aspect of local culture, despite whatever horrors that they have been subjected to or are going through, that is meaningful. And that is something we can potentially really explore. Okay, so I've sort of mentioned about celebrating the past goal, and then only then often do we look to the future and make plans. I want to share this little video with you that's also about the team of life, but I actually want to use it to introduce these other principles. Because in lots of my work, it's not just the metaphoric practice that I find helpful. It's when I find a way that I don't expect people just to speak to me. Sometimes I'm in lots of contexts and I think, why would this person want to speak to me? Even if I am kind and develop skills and, I'm not putting myself down, but actually I realise, they probably don't really want to talk to me, but there might be some people that they would like to communicate with, speak with, and even more importantly, who they'd like to make a contribution to. And what I found very helpful is when I think about that and I think, okay, well, how can I make it possible for this person or this family or this group to not just speak to me, but maybe speak through me to somebody else who maybe is going through similar experiences, or maybe it's some person that they'd really like to assist in some way. And that principle I find incredibly helpful, particularly the more difficult a situation is. It's also very helpful when I keep in mind that people, yes, they represent their own personal experience, and that's crucial. That's what I'm needing to respond to. But they're also very often actually representing a social issue or multiple social issues as well. And so if that's the case, how can I try to enable them to make some contribution to others and also perhaps some contribution towards a broader social issue? So I'm just going to play this clip. It's only a short clip. I think it's about 6 minutes long. And it's with a young guy, 11-year-old, and his family. And I met with him just once, so everything in this small video was generated, as Kate said, meaning was generated during this one conversation through sporting metaphor. I didn't know what the issue was, why I was being asked to meet with him. I just got this call from the education department to meet with this young person and his mum. So I knew it was pretty serious. This was not a routine scenario. I don't work with the education department. I don't usually meet even with folks in these circumstances, but I got this call from someone I knew. So I knew it was pretty serious. And the only other thing I knew was that he liked football. And I knew that because we had to schedule the appointment in between his two different training camps that he was participating in. So it was pretty serious engagement. I'll just play this short video. And one of the things I think is interesting about it is that he might have come at the beginning because he was being seen as the problem, but by the end, he was contributing to a broader social issue, I think. I'll see what you think. Okay, I've just got to go over here and put the video on. Here we go.
I'm 11 years old. I've been playing football since I was 4. I'm currently at a Barcelona camp, even though I support Real Madrid. My mum says she has photos of me when I was only 1, probably still not walking but kicking the ball. This is my team of life. If you look closely, you might see that my coaches are my mum and dad. They have taught me to look after myself and care about others. They teach me in a fun way. They are good coaches. They have probably learned how to look after themselves and care about others from their parents. My goalkeeper is my bracelet and my wooden cross. They protect me. They make me feel safe in hard situations. When I take my bracelet off, it makes me feel bad. It connects me to my religion. My brother, my cousins and my friend are all in the back line. They always stick up for me. And I'm in the midfield. I'm the captain with the C next to me. My dad is right next to me. In the midfield, we need to think before. We need to predict what might happen next. And we need to be allowed to really communicate with all the other players. The wingers bring the ball forward. My auntie is always there. She's always doing things. She makes fun for me. On the other wing is my grandpa. He always says kind things about me. And there are the strikers, the ones who score the goals. My favourite strikers are Suarez and Vardy. On my team of life I have 2 strikers. One of my strikers are the actual soccer ball. It's a very important part of my team. It keeps me free from freedom. I have one favourite soccer ball and it came from my mum and dad for my birthday. I'm going to keep it forever. It's an official match ball. My other striker is school. School helps me. I need to be smart. School helps me in life. The name of the climb is Stay Strong FC or Budijak Faka in Serbian. We have scored some important goals. One important goal we have scored is coming together after a fight. One of the things that Stay Strong FC is about is caring about others. So we try not to fight with friends. If we do have a fight with a friend, we try to get back together again. We have strategies for this. Notice if your friend is starting to get angry with you, walk away, don't talk, apologize, try to forget about the bad things, be good again, try not to have a fight again anymore, be good friends for a long time. These are our strategies from coming together after a fight and stopping fighting from getting worse. We have 7 strategies, like 7 aside. I think these strategies are important for everyone, and so does my mum. Here is a goal map about coming together after a fight. It shows how we scored this goal. When I score a goal, I celebrate by trying even harder, and we never give up at the end. The next goal for Stay Strong FC is to turn a small thing into a big thing. The next goal is good behaviour at any place. In football, you need to train to be the best. So we also need to train for good behaviour. We have 4 different training exercises. Calm your nerves, don't get angry at people, just ignore them, be kind, and share stuff with people. If there are any other people who are trying to achieve this goal, we have a special idea for a training exercise to calm your nerves. Get your coach to give you something really hard to do and do the exercise and try not to get angry if you can't do it. This is a good way for calming your nerves. While you're doing this exercise, don't think about negative stuff. Just think about succeeding. This is Stay Strong FC and I'm 11 years old. I think it's a good team with lots of different combinations. And if you are trying to have good behaviours at any place, or if you are trying to come back after fights, I hope our ideas were helpful for you.
Goal! in the first part of that meeting, I didn't know what the issue was, why we were meeting, until we talked really about one goal the team had already scored. That was when I started to learn about it, which was coming together after a fight. It was only at that point that this young man's mother suddenly, I think, thought, okay, now we're getting somewhere. I thought before, she probably thought, why are we talking about football? We talk enough about football, I suspect, in that house. I could only imagine. But do you see how what might have started off as being seen as a problem in relation to this young person, and clearly the fights were a really significant issue by the time I would be getting called, but by the end, this family is making a contribution, this team is making a contribution in relation to this broader social issue of fights. Young men's violence, older men's violence is obviously an absolutely profound social issue, devastating effects. It's actually why I come to be engaged in narrative practice in the first place, through that social issue. And in this, in all our narrative practice work, we're trying to think, how can those struggling in relation to a social issue make some contribution? I'm seeing some lovely comments in the chat here. When that video was then launched, all his family was there, and it wasn't just individual achievement. That would be quite fraught if the achievement then got located only in the individual. This is a team effort, team contribution. Okay, so I hope that this sort of engagement in relation to metaphor might be relevant in your context. I've just shared one methodology in any detail, and there's more to it that I haven't shared, but I can send information about that. And if you're interested, I can also send information about those other metaphoric practices I mentioned. But again, I'm particularly interested in how you might unpack, really explore with people whichever aspect of local cultural life is meaningful to them, and then think, how could our conversations work through that metaphor, and in turn honour people's own skills and abilities. Weren't they fantastic strategies that this young guy came up with? Like, just wonderful, wonderful ideas that I could never have dreamt of. And having seven aside, like when you're working within what people care about, it's so much easier for them to then come up with these ideas that completely beyond what we would imagine. And that last training exercise to train your nerves. Anyway, I loved it. So I'll just peek at the chat again, in case there's anything I should be attending to. Game of Life. Lots of different... Love more on the smartphone. Yes, okay, well, I'll send more on the smartphone, and then you can also be in touch with the authors directly. So Chris in Hong Kong, I'm sure, would love to hear from you about the smartphone. Okay, so I hope it also just illustrated these principles, even if only a fleeting way, because in my work now, I'm never thinking of only working with one person or one family or even one group or even one community. I'm always thinking from the beginning, who could they make a contribution to? How could their hard-won knowledge, what they've learnt through struggle, how could we find a way for that to make a contribution to somebody else? Usually people don't meet in person. Usually I'm like the conduit, and they're actually anonymous, confidential sharings of knowledge and stories that happen. And then they get to have a sense that, yes, they've actually made a contribution to the lives of others. It's not made up, it's not grand, but it's also not made up. It's a meaningful contribution to address some broader social issue. Okay, so there's one other theme that I want to share in my remaining time with you, and that's also about artistic practice. And it feels great to be sharing this with a pluralistic community, because something so crazy happened, didn't, in the field of psychotherapy, when the fields of psychotherapy and psychiatry built up in Western culture. Somehow they got separated from the realms of the arts. And yet, actually, it's the arts in every culture I've ever come in contact with has always been one key realm of responding to and transforming suffering. So it's a really strange division that is created in Australia, at least. Not in First Nations cultures, actually. They do not separate healing practices and arts practices. Anyway, that's another story and not mine to tell. But in narrative practice, I'm therefore really interested in how we can bring different artistic practices to our work. Now, for me, that means song, because that's a realm that I feel at home with and in. I've got absolutely no visual artistic talent, so I would be hopeless there. But I could collaborate with people with artistic visual talent to assist me in my work. So it doesn't matter if we don't actually have the skills in an artistic realm. These can be the sorts of collaborations that I know this conference is all about. We can collaborate with artists, with people in theatre, with songwriters. And I just want to share one story and one song to finish. This is a story in which I was not the therapist or principal practitioner. Erin Costello is a feminist narrative therapist who works with sexual assault survivors, and this is a story that relates to Jess. Jess is a pseudonym, but Jess has given me permission to share the song today. And Erin accompanies survivors of sexual assault from the first moment that they might come to a hospital or crisis centre or a service, and she will stay with them for as long as it may take, whether or not they then try to pursue claims of justice through the criminal legal system. And if they do, Erin will be with them through that process. And it's quite a significant role, and obviously the criminal legal system is another topic, but I'm sure you're all well aware of its failings in many, many ways. And this story, and therefore song, relates to an experience, that great injustice that Jess experienced. She was assaulted by her intimate partner, and then male partner, and then attempted to find redress through the criminal legal system, and it was a very demeaning and risky and horrible scenario, as it often is. So Erin, as her narrative therapist and counsellor, would take great care in honouring Jess's particular words. And in narrative practice, I'm sure you're aware, we sometimes ask permission to take notes or to rescue words, not rescuing the person, but rescuing their words, so that their words can have a longer life. These become documents or letters, or they can also become songs. I'm just going to put up on the screen some of Jess's words that Erin wrote down, and they describe some of her experiences of trying to testify and what this was like, and where it led to. So I'm not going to read them out, I'll let you read them. So I'll just put them up here and give you time to read them. And just one more page. So profound injustices upon injustices. And unfortunately, at least in Australia, this is all too common. Both the epidemic of men's violence to women and the appalling responses to it culturally and socially. Erin and Jess then came up with a title for what she had written. And this was the title, There is So Much More to This Story. And they wanted to share this with others. It's part of a longer presentation. I'm just sharing a part of it today. And when Erin shared this and I heard it, as a witness, I wanted to think of some way of responding. And in narrative practice, there's quite a tradition of thinking about outsider witness responses. And they can take many, many forms, different ways of acknowledging the testimonies that might be shared with us. The form that I chose in this situation was to write a song from Jess's words, pretty much just her words, you will see, but I did add just a few, and I've highlighted which ones I added. So I'll just play this song, and really because I think us bringing together all that we can to honour survivors' stories is so significant, I just we'll play this song now. This is your time to tell your story, but you can't mention this and this. Well, it's not my story. Then is it? It was clear from the start this was not even my case. I was just a witness in the Crown versus him. I was hardly told anything. And there's so much more. Yes, there's so much more. There is so much more to this story. I got up, gave evidence without a screen. I knew what had happened. But there is so much more, so much more, so much more to this story. If I was not who I was, I would have taken my own life. I am who I am, so I'm still here. Now we have heard your story, it's ours to carry like a strong melody. It calls for us to do more. Now we've heard your story, to carry like a strong melody. It calls for us to do more. If I was not who I was, I would have taken my own life. I am who I am, so I'm still here. Now we've heard your story, it's ours to carry like a strong to do more. Now we've heard your story, it's ours to carry like a strong melody. It calls for us to do more. There is so much more. There is so much more. There is so much more to this story. So they're very, very powerful words, aren't they? And I've heard them before, so I just want to acknowledge that it's a pretty powerful testimony. And Jess knows that I'm sharing the song today, so if anyone wanted to send Jess any responses, I can pass them on. But I know also that just the hope that anything in this presentation that could be of any use to you in working with the people that you're responding to, because I know you're all responding to folks experiencing different sufferings way over there on the other part of the world. So feels a little bit abrupt, but I also know that my time is coming to an end. So I just want to thank you again for the chance to be with you, and I'll put my contact detail here so that if anyone does want to be in contact with me, or Erin for that matter, and I can send you Erin's paper, because Erin has described her work with Jess in more detail. So you can write to me directly, and I will pass that on to her, onto them both. I hope I've covered these different realms here, and I really appreciate the chance to be with you, and I hope the rest of your conference goes fantastically well there in the sunshine.